In the name of God, hello everybody. This is session 7 of your syntax lesson. As you know, in the previous session, I talked about the inflectional phrase, which we use inflectional phrase instead of, sentence, which it consists of, the head of the inflection. The head of the inflection itself consists of two features, the tense and the agreement, as you see in the previous session. In this part, I want to talk about another sentences. Look at the examples, these two examples. I will ask if Poirot will abandon his investigation. And the second one, I will say that Poirot will abandon his investigation. You see here, the subordinate clause, this part, in these two sentences is a kind of, we call them subordinate clause. The first one is a kind of interrogative subordinate clause. Because of this, if. And the second one, as you see here, because of that, is a kind of declarative subordinate clause. The difference between the two is signaled by the choice of complementizer. We call them, these means, if and that complementizer, introducing the clause. If, for example, versus that, you see here, these are the difference between these two sentences. In other words, the complementizer determines the type of the clause. This suggests that we treat the complementizer represented as a C. We call it C, complementizer, the abbreviation, the summary of complementizer, as the head of the S1 bar. So complementizer do not constitute an open class. The four complementizers that introduces subordinate clauses in English are that, if, whether, and for. So we have four kind of complementizers in English: that, if, whether, and for. So look at the tree diagram for the sentences. You see here this kind of sentence, as you see here. So we have a kind of complementizer phrase here. We write here CP, which consists of a C1 bar, then the head of the C, which is that or for or whether or if. So this is the head of the complementizer first. This head combined with IP, the sentence Poirot abandoned the investigation, or Poirot to abandon the investigation, you see here. So this complementizer, the head, combined with the complementizer, the IP, the sentence, to produce C1 bar. Then this C1 bar combined with the specifier to produce the maximal projection, CP, complementizer phrase. We have some movements in each sentence, maybe sometimes. We call some of these movements as head-to-head movement. For example, let's consider the following examples. Example number 1, Poirot will abandon the investigation after lunch. And then we can say, will Poirot abandon the investigation after lunch? This is a kind of yes-no question, as you know. And we can produce a kind of information question. When will Poirot abandon the investigation? You see here, we have a kind of movement in these two kind of sentences. We want to show them by using tree diagram. You see here, first, the first sentence, Poirot will abandon the investigation after lunch. You see here, the head, the inflection, combined with the complement VP to produce I1 bar. Then this I1 bar combined with the subject Poirot to produce IP. And then we have CP. You see here? The second sentence, will Poirot abandon the investigation? As you see here, will from the node of I, inflection, moves to the head of the C, complementizer. So we kind of a movement here. You see here? So we can say, will Poirot abandon the investigation after lunch? This is a kind of yes-no question. So here we have a kind of head-to-head movement, as you see here. The movement from the head of the I, inflection, to the head of the C, complementizer. So we call this kind of movement head-to-head movement. So we can produce a kind of yes-no question. Will Poirot abandon the investigation? The WH question, or information question, again, we have a kind of movement, will moves from the head of the I to the head of the C, and then we have a kind of WH here in a spec CP, a specifier of the CP. When will Poirot abandon the investigation? So we produce a kind of WH question or information question. So we can, move some elements from the sentence. Some of them we call them head-to-head movement, because we move some head from one position of the head to the another head, so we call it head-to-head movement. Again, we come back to the structure of CP. So we have proposed that the structure of S1 bar can be assimilated to the X bar format in 39 in the following way. We have another kind of clauses. We call them small clauses. Okay, you see here the example of small clauses. The first one, I consider Margaret very intelligent. This is in the bracket. This is a kind of small clause. Margaret very intelligent. It consists of two kind of NP or adjective phrase, not verb here. You see here, there is no verb here. So we call it a small clause. Or we have another clause, Margaret considers the taxi driver an important ally. You see here, again, we have a kind of a small clause in bracket, the taxi driver an important ally. There is no, verb here. And the third one, I consider your proposal completely out of the question. You see here, your proposal completely out of the question. Again, you see here a kind of a small clause. So these are kind of small clause which they don't have any kind of overt verb. So look at the example with a verb. Margaret is very intelligent. Okay, this is a kind of in comparison with a small clause, it consists of a kind of to be verb. So look at the the tree diagram of the small clause, Margaret very intelligent. We have a kind of XP, then we talk about this kind of XP, which consists of the subject NP, Margaret, and the kind of adjective phrase, very intelligent. Intelligent is a kind of adjective, so we have it adjective phrase. And very is, we put it in the specifier of the adjective phrase. But what is the, the structure of these XP of, small clauses? So we can talk about this kind of small clauses. So the question arises as to the status of XP in the previous diagram. As a first observation, note that in this kind of example, look at this example, does not seem to conform to the requirements of X bar theory. X bar theory doesn't provide structures where two maximal projection are sister nodes. You see, we haven't two maximal projection as a sister nodes. One option would be to say that the small clause XP is in fact the maximal projection of a functional head, for example F, an abstract head which does not dominate overt material. Maybe we can put FP, functional phrase, instead of XP in the the small clause. So excuse me. So again, you see here the adjective intelligent in the previous example is the predicate of the small clause, has overt agreement morphology in languages like French. For example, very intelligent here has a kind of agreement with the subject in this class, but not in English, in languages some French. For example, each number and gender combination has a different form. Intelligent, for example, when the intelligent is a kind of masculine or feminine, they are different. They have different form. So the adjectives here agrees with the subject. We could then assume that in fact small clauses contain an agreement head which dominates agreement phrase. So instead of XP in a small clauses we can put agreement phrase, because there are some agreements in some languages like French between this adjective and the subject. So we may put agreement phrase instead of XP in a small clauses. So instead of this small clause, as you see here, Margaret very intelligent, we can put agreement phrase instead of XP, because there are some kind of agreement between this adjective and the subject in languages like French, as you see here. There are some relations in sentences. We call them structural relations. So in this part, I want to talk about this kind of structural relations. To illustrate the role of the notion C command in the theory, we first consider agreement pattern. We want to talk about the term or the relation C command. What is C command? First, we want to talk about the agreement pattern. Again, the agreement. Let us examine some examples of agreement patterns. Consider this sentence: this book about Margaret, or these books about Margaret. You see here there is a kind of agreement between this kind of determiner, I mean this, and the noun book, and these books. So there is some kind of agreement pattern in English language and in other languages. In English, there is little overt agreement, but again, we have adopted the assumption that inflection is specified for abstract agreement. So, as you know, we put agreement, I mean, below inflection, as you know. So, look at these examples. Poirot abandons the investigation because this is the third singular person. We add S to the verb. But when we say the inspectors, this is, I mean, plural, abandon. You see here, there is no S to the verb, the investigation. And then we abandon the investigation. The tree diagram here in English show this kind of, I mean, agreement. You see here, if we have Poirot as the subject, as the, I mean, third singular subject, we have, I mean, S at the end of the verb, abandons the investigation. But if we have a kind of plural subject, the inspectors here, we don't have that S. We just say abandon the investigation. So this shows a kind of, I mean, agreement. So we put the agreement sign below the, I mean, the node of the inflection I, as you know, in the we talked about it in the previous part. So this shows a kind of agreement. If we compare the tree diagram above, we find a parallelism in the configurational relation between the agreeing constituents. In all three examples, the phrasal head agrees with its specifier. This type of agreement is, we call them a specifier head agreement. So again, look at the tree diagram, these three kind of, I mean, example and the tree diagram. We call them a kind of a specifier head agreement. This is a kind of a specifier head agreement. This is agreement. But what is, I mean, C command or government? C command and the first branching node. First, C command, the definition of this term, C command. This is a kind of, I mean, important definition, an important term in the syntax. So you should know this kind of term, C command. Node A, C commands node B if and only if A does not dominate B and B does not dominate A, and second, the first branching node dominating A also dominates B. You see the tree diagram here? You see here from our discussion of C command above, it follows that A, the governor, C command B, the governee, and conversely, the B, I mean C command A. Okay? So you see here, they are a kind of mutual C command. So they are sisters of each other. No one, I mean, dominate the other. I mean, neither A dominates B nor B dominates A. And when we, I mean, when we the line, I mean, we draw a line to the W, it's again we can, I mean, receive the B node. So this is, we call it again, we define it again. So A does not dominate B, B does not dominate A. The first branching node Dominating A also dominates B. You see here again, the first branching node dominating A dominates B again. So this is a kind, there is a kind of mutual C command. A C commands B, B C commands A. They are sisters of each other. So this is a kind of relation of C command. And what is government? A governs B if and only if A is a governor, and A C commands B and B C commands A. This is a definition of government which is related to C command. So if A, we call A governs B if and only if A is a governor and A C commands B and B C commands A. So it's a kind of relation which we call it, government. So which is based on C command. So we define two terms here, C command and government. So you should know these kind of terms in tree diagram. We have just two other titles which I want to talk about it, and we can end this session. First, learnability and binary branching, some discussion. A child equipped with a universal grammar that implements only binary branching. This binary branching means just two lines from each node. We should have two lines, just like the previous. For example, look at this one. This is binary branching. In each tree diagram, we should have just binary branching, not ternary branching, just binary branching. So we'll have fewer decisions. If we have binary branching, the children will have fewer decisions to make when assigning syntactic structure to data he's exposed to than a child equipped with a less constrained universal grammar which allows ternary or, for example, four-way branching. So this is the presupposition of each child, which we have a kind of binary branching, not ternary or four-way branching. If the ultimate goal of our grammar is to account for language acquisition, then it will be natural to aim for the more restricted type of grammar in which fewer decisions have to be made by the child. Fewer choices will automatically mean more speed in the construction of the core grammar of the language acquired. If we have fewer branches like the binary branching here, so the speed of the language learning is high, and the children can learn the core grammar of each language simply. So this is the hypothesis about binary branching. And the last one, the features and category labels. Following the example of phonologists, like the phonologists who consider the distinctive feature as the primitive of phonology, syntactician proposes that the lexical categories like noun, verb, and etc. are not syntactic primitives, but should be seen as complexes of syntactic features. So, like phonologists, syntacticians consider the lexical category which is composed of just some syntactic features. These syntactic features themselves will be the basic building blocks, the primitives of syntactic structure. Look at these features. The features that are often taken to constitute the lexical and phrasal categories are, for example, plus or minus noun, plus minus verb. The lexical categories can be decomposed into their features. Look at these, lexical items. The noun, we can say that the noun is plus noun minus verb, verb minus noun plus verb. The adjective is a kind of plus noun plus verb, and the preposition, the preposition is composed of minus noun minus verb. You see here, by these two kind of feature, noun and verb, and show this by plus and minus, we can define the lexical categories like noun, verb, adjective, preposition based on this feature. So as you see here, noun again, noun composed of two features, plus noun minus v, verb minus noun plus v, adjective plus noun plus V, and preposition minus noun minus V. So you see here, this is the features of each category. So this is the end of the chapter, I think, number 2. We talk about the sentences here, the movements in these sentences, the terms like the C command and government, and at last we talk about binary branching, and in the first slide we talk about the features and category labels like noun, verb, adjective, and preposition. And that's enough for today. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye, everybody.